Our scripture begins in the Old Testament in the 18th chapter of Genesis, beginning in verse 9. And the men said to Abraham, I will surely return to you at this time next year, and behold, Sarah, your wife, will have a son. And Sarah was listening in at the tent door, which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in age. Sarah was past childbearing. Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "After I have become old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also?" And the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh, saying, 'Shall I indeed bear a son when I am old?' Is anything too difficult for the Lord? At the appointed time, I will return to you. At this time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah denied, however, saying, "I did not laugh," for she was afraid. And he said to her, "No, but you did laugh." And then turning to Paul's letter to the church at Rome, the first 11 verses of chapter 6. "What then shall we say? Are we to continue in sin so that grace may increase? May it never be so. How shall we who died to sin still live in it? Or do you not know that all of us who have been baptized into Christ Jesus have been baptized into his death? Therefore we have been buried with him through baptism into death, so that as Christ lives, so too we shall live. He who was raised from the dead through the glory of the Father, so we too might walk in newness of life. For if we have become united with him in the likeness of his death, certainly we shall also be in the likeness of his resurrection. Knowing this, that our old self was crucified with him in order that our body of sin might be done away with, so that we would no longer be slaves to sin. For he who has died is free from sin. Now if we have died with Christ, we believe that we shall also live with him, knowing that Christ, having been raised from the dead, is never to die again. Death no longer is master over him. For the death that he died to sin once for all. But the life that he lives to God. Even so, consider yourselves to be dead to sin, but also alive to God in Christ Jesus. Here ends the reading of his word to us. May it be a blessing for our daily living. Well, it's kind of a strange feeling that this should be the verse of the season and for this particular Sunday, but be that as it may, I'm going to go ahead and preach on it anyway. Because in her encounter with God, Sarah learned much more than simply the gender of the child she was carrying. Ultrasound imaging is a technology that allows doctors to peer inside the human body. It can detect spots on the liver and clogged arteries. And of course, it can tell an expectant mother the gender of her unborn child and provide that important information about its health. And this brings us to Genesis, where we pick up the story of an older woman who gets some rather unexpected news, to say the least. There was a time not long ago when determining the gender of a child was far from scientific. You maybe have heard of some of the ways. Old Aunt Patty, for example, was convinced you could tell whether the happy couple was going to have a boy or a girl by the way the mother carried the baby. She insisted if it looked like the baby was resting low in the mother, a boy. If the baby rested high or was carried high, it was supposed to be a girl. Grandma Emily, on the other hand, was convinced that gender could be determined by the mother's cravings. If the one-to-be wanted sweets and chocolates, she was having a girl. And if she wanted things that were sour, well, there was only one left over. It would be a boy. And then, of course, the neighbors chimed in. They believed the key was the father, not the mother. You watched the father, and he gained a sympathy weight during the pregnancy. Then they thought it would be a girl. But if the father gained no weight during the pregnancy, it would be a boy. But let me tell you about my grandmother. My grandmother Marie, who was a surgical nurse for 40 years. And she had the stories to tell. The one that she told was a favorite of ours, and at her rosary, 3 of the nurses came over to my brother and me and asked, "Did your grandmother tell you about the time she went out to Union County to deliver a baby?" We laughed into the story. I said, but tell it anyway. And they told it just as Grandma told it. Somewhere between 3 and 4 in the morning, old Doc Murphy called Marie Elizabeth Carnahan, the Irish nurse she was, for what he thought would be a difficult delivery. She described how he arrived at her apartment in a one-horse-drawn sleigh. It was well below zero at that time of day, that time of winter, and when she got into the sleigh, he pulled up the buffalo robe to help keep her warm and ride out to the farm. When they got to the farm, it was going to be a difficult delivery. They decided they needed as much light as they could. They prepared not the bedroom, but the dining room. The dining room table was to be the delivery room bed. And the buffet that had mirrors on the side would be a great reflection of light. The farmer went out to the barn and got all the extra lanterns from the barn, brought them in, placed them on the buffet, and lit them. And there was great light for the doctor to work. But it soon became obvious it was not one, but two who were to be born. Both of them premature. Both of them barely over a pound. And so my grandmother found some shoe boxes and lined them in cotton. And as they were born, she cleaned and laid them one in each of the 2 boxes. And good Catholic that she was, she baptized them immediately, Mary and Martha, good biblical names. And here's the rest of the story. They weren't boys, they were girls. And my grandmother would say, well, I told you it was dark. But we figured there are 2 6'5" twin boys in Union County walking around living under the names of Mary and Martha, who knows. But in the late 1970s, these methods of trying to ascertain the gender of the child began to fall into disuse. A much more accurate solution to everyone's curiosity had become readily available. It was ultrasound or sonogram. An ultrasound machine sends sound waves that are above our hearing frequencies and sends them into our bodies. And they record how they bounce back to the machine. In real time, a computer renders an image from their data. And these images can reveal a lot, from potential difficulties with the pregnancy to the gender of the child. But here's my point. The question is this: if we can accept and believe that ultrasound can do scientifically, as we just described, could it be so difficult to conceive of prayer as sending sound waves heavenward and receiving waves of energy bouncing back to us? Of course, Sarah in the Bible didn't have ultrasound technology available to her, and yet, as far as we know, she was the first woman ever to know the gender of her unborn child. And she didn't journal her cravings to determine the gender of her child. Her ultrasound faith in the Lord told her all she needed to know. She was having a son who would fulfill God's promise to her and to Abraham. Slide 2. At first, Sarah is incredulous. When she overhears the messengers of God telling her husband what she's going to have a baby, she laughs. First of all, she must imagine to herself, why are they telling him? He's only an observer. It might be well to tell me and consult with me. But who could blame her? The thought of having a baby at her advanced age is absurd. She says to herself, her husband is old and she's well past her childbearing years. But this isn't the story about what is possible through science, is it? Nor is it a story about aging well. Scripture in Romans and Hebrews both remind us that this is a story of faith. We might call it ultrasound faith. But it's fun to think of Sarah's laugh that day. Did she just lose it? It was such a spontaneous response, but her embarrassment and denial when she learns that her visitors had overheard her seemed to indicate this was an involuntary reaction to seemingly absurd news. During the pregnancy, however, she and Abraham must grow to accept and even embrace the laughter. For 9 months, Sarah had reason to laugh everywhere she went, telling her friends that she was having her first child at age 90. Must have been a source of joy and laughter. Baby shower must have been a hoot. When she started to show and people on the streets saw her, their puzzled looks and double takes must have been fun to see, at least for the happy couple witnessing God's love at work in their lives. But here's the climax of the story. When that child was born, Abraham names the baby Isaac, which is the Hebrew word for laughter. Isaac, the child named Laughter, was not just a little bundle of joy to his unlikely parents. He was also the fulfillment of God's promise to Abraham, to the whole world. Abraham and Sarah's ultrasound faith in the love and promises of God enabled them to see what appeared impossible. I believe that we are called to have this ultrasound faith as well. Third slide. The story of the birth of Isaac is not just a miraculous origin story of the people of Israel. This is a story about the love and faithfulness of God and the lengths to which God is willing to go to bless us. As human beings, we get to choose how we view the world around us. Like a mother to be, we can opt out to view our circumstances through the lens of what we can see, or, with ultrasound faith like Abraham and Sarah, seeing something even better. Against all hope, as Paul writes in Romans, the 4th chapter, against reason, against what they could do themselves, Abraham and Sarah believed that God had something good in store for them. They could see a new future that God was promising. It's pretty easy at times to trust only what we can see, even when that is incredibly unreliable. But many of us have been there. The end of our ability to understand what is happening in our lives comes to an end. Some have received a diagnosis for which they have no idea how to deal with it. Others have been called into their supervisor's office and told they no longer have a job. Others have had someone about whom they care deeply who now hurts them or disappoints them. Some of us have been exactly where Abraham and Sarah were, desperately wanting to be parents and hearing that having a child is not likely to happen, at least not without the help of technology and at great expense. We have fallen into those times when all we can see in front of us is the struggle, the hardship, the disappointment, yes, the denial. The darkness seems thick, and we're convinced we do not see light at the end of the tunnel. This can also happen to our communities. In a world where bad news travels fast, we can become convinced our neighborhood, or our nation, world, or church may be doomed. But this is not what God has in mind. God, when we, through the eyes of faith, see God and God's promises of blessing even when they seem impossible or absurd, ultrasound faith offers us a view we wouldn't typically be able to discern. But we firmly believe that God has not left us to figure it all out on our own. Instead, ultrasound faith allows us to believe, sometimes against all hope, that God is working out blessing after blessing in our lives and in the world. When the diagnosis comes, ultrasound faith gives us the strength to face illness, knowing we are in God's hands through it all. When our jobs are taken, ultrasound faith gives us the courage to send out resumes, believing God has something better for us. When the relationship appears beyond reconciliation, ultrasound faith gives us the patience to wait, trust, and pray for God to soften the heart of the other, or for the humility to ask for forgiveness. When we are told we might never be able to have a baby, ultrasound faith opens our eyes to new possibilities of becoming parents. When all we see of the world is darkness, or problems, or pain, ultrasound faith calls us to reach out to those in need. And in so doing, it is ultrasound faith that sends us into the troubled spots in our city to work the will of God and to bring change in the light of hope to others. It is ultrasound faith that gives us the boldness to believe we can minister to our friends who are hungry and homeless in ways that will change our neighborhoods. It is ultrasound faith that sends us out to repair homes, provide health care, to build schools. It is ultrasound faith that brings the people of God together to plan strategically to rebuild the youth program, believing that God will bless us so that God might then change the world through us. Yes, Abraham and Sarah laughed out of joy. The very idea God might bless them in their advanced age with the gift of a child. Their ultrasound faith allowed them to believe in something better. They believed God's promise, and they could see the blessing that was to come for them and for the soul world. May we also have a similar vision of something better to come for our church, for our community, and for our world. This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
any woman would. When hearing news of joy, gonna have a baby boy, it was so good. And I've got a feeling, yes I do, when Sarah laughed, she did, she laughed, God was laughing too.
Tithes and offerings may be presented at the offering plates placed in the narthex on either side of the main door. We thank you for your continuing support. Greg has a special music for us at this time. seated. Birthdays and anniversaries. And do you have one?
Yes. Wednesday the 24th, next week, Peggy and I will be celebrating our 59th anniversary.
That's good. And the daughter came early to help celebrate.
Yeah.
That's Wednesday. That's this coming Wednesday.
You know what I said?
He said next week.
It's this week. You got the 59.
Donna's birthday, Brian.
Right. Yes.
Next week. Or this week.
And Katie Wagner on the 27th, Saturday. And Lacey Gregorick on the 24th. And anniversary besides Dan and Peggy, Pat and Renee Murphy, Karen and Harvey Vogel. On the 25th, it's their 43rd. Got a ways to go to get to 59, don't we? That's wonderful. Well, please stand, and Katie, please stand so we can sing to you, and Don Colfer, and who else did we name this year? This is it. Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, God bless you, happy birthday to you. And to all of you in the audience, if you have birthdays or anniversaries coming up, send us a text, send us a message, we'd like to include it. The joy of celebrating births and anniversaries together. Set for Thursday, July 30th. Can you imagine we're already talking about the end of July? We just got to June, right? No, we're 3/4 the way through June. Donations can be brought to the church Monday through Thursday between the hours of 8 and noon. If you have larger items, you can make arrangements to bring items outside the church office hours. Contact Leslie Follett at her home. And secondly, the Houston Food Bank, along with Brazoria County Dream Center, will be set up for a drive-through food pickup at the Sweeney High School on June 23rd. What day of the week is that? Right before Dan's anniversary. Okay.
And we can use volunteers, we get 9:30.
We can use volunteers, come at 9:30.
At the high school.
Meet at the high school? Yeah, come to the high school.
We'll be continuing that with in July on the 7th and 21st, both on Tuesday.
That's what it says here too. That's right. Good, Sherry. Good job. If you'd like to help, please contact Sherry Van Avery. It says here. And then finally, Marty will be out of the office this week, much deserved vacation Monday through Friday. She'll be back in the office Saturday. The bulletin will be prepared on Saturday. We won't miss a beat, but we always miss her, but we wish her well on her vacation. She's earned it. She's got a good doctor's report. Her situation is not as serious as we thought, but she says it's still something. And the doctor agreed, so they're still going to do some tests. But bless her heart for all that she does for all of us. And, any other announcements? Yes,
I just want to remind our prayer warriors, next Sunday is our Sunday for the One Day One Church. I'll send out an email.
Okay.
to remind.
Get our email. Frank?
Every year at Father's Day, Bobby Darren and I have a twinge of jealousy for all of the men and women that have grown up with their fathers. Bobby lost his father at a very early age, and I lost my father when I was 5 years of age. And the ironic part of it on my father, he drowned on June 19th out in the middle of the night with 3 other fellas trying to find a black gentleman that was a caretaker of the cattle and stock of Imperial Sugar Company between Eagle Lake and Garvey. It was one of the second largest twinge of jealousy for those that grew up with their father. But I just thought I'd mention that.
It's a great story. Great story, thank you.
I did want to ask,
Great.
what do you got, Mike? Did want to ask, prayer for Chris, his wife. They identified COVID where she works as a nurse for a clinic. They're not sure anything right now at all, so we want to ask for prayer for them.
Okay. Prayers for those we mentioned earlier in the service too, but they'll be in the reminders. Will happen this week. And let's circle around as many of us as there are. Oh, I see. Yeah, your spirit has touched my spirit. Your spirit has touched my spirit. Juliana?
I can do
I can do it.
all